But he really did want to bring up the tariffs, which I thought was really funny because for some reason he thinks that's his greatest idea. He brings up how, again, false claim, how McKinley had the greatest economy ever because of the tariffs we had, and then they screwed it all up by including the income tax. Now, don't get me wrong, not a fan of the income tax. There could have been alternatives, but the way our economy works right now, you're not going to fucking run an economy on tariffs. And what he's talking about is raising taxes on individuals. He's talking about raising your taxes. He just calls it something else. He says tariffs, and he says the most beautiful word in the English language, better than love, better than anything else. And it's just like, does he understand what they are? And then he talks about them, and you're like, oh no, he doesn't actually understand what they are. And he, at least he shifted from saying the other countries are paying for it, and now has shifted to saying that the businesses are paying for it. That he gave himself credit for Elon Musk having Starlink down in North Carolina, claiming that when he went down to North Carolina, which by the way was after Elon Musk sent Starlink down to North Carolina, that someone told him if he could get a hold of Elon to get them Starlink. And then boom, he got on the phone with Elon, and Elon sent the Starlink. I was literally waiting for him to say that it was his fucking idea to create Starlink. And because he kept talking about, like, he has this fascination with the boosters and like the reverse boosters where they come back and land on that freaking bat. And he kept bringing it back to that every time he talked about Elon. Because don't get me wrong, that shit's fucking cool. I fucking love it. However, literally not what they're talking about whatsoever. And he just kept bringing it back to that. And then I was waiting for him to just say, and then I went to Elon when he owned, what's that shit called? PayPal. When they started the what is it called, XPay or whatever the hell it was called at the time, because he calls everything X. And I told him, you know what, you should give this up and go work on electric cars for a while, and then start a space program, because he's trying to give himself credit for stuff that he literally had nothing to do, which is normal for Trump anyway. But the fact that he's throwing in the Elon stuff, this is one of my favorite parts about Ukraine. Give me a second.
If you have a smart president, he can deal with Russia. He can deal with all of it. Russia would have never gone into Ukraine if I were president. How would you have stopped it? Automatic, two things. I told him. I said, Vladimir, you're not going in. I used to talk to him all the time. You're not going in. I can't tell you what I told him because I think it would be inappropriate. But someday he'll tell you. But he would have never gone in. But you know why else he wouldn't have gone in? Oil prices at $40 a barrel wouldn't have allowed him, wouldn't have given him the money to prosecute that war, wouldn't have given him the money. I said it with I was with President Xi. I said it was almost the same conversation.
We're in China
with
now.
Vladimir, it was Moscow. With President Xi, it was Beijing. It was almost the exact same conversation. I said, don't do it. He would have never done it. The day I left, they flew 28 bombers over the middle of Taiwan. 28 bombers. And it's the apple of his eye, and the same thing with Russia. It's the apple. Ukraine is the apple of his eye. I used to talk to him. I had a very good relationship with him. He wouldn't have done it. He would have never done it. But he also wouldn't have done it because of one of the reasons that what happened is, number one, he doesn't respect Biden at all. Not even a little bit. And who the hell would? One of the things that, if you have a smart president, he can deal with Russia. He can do.
So he goes from Ukraine to China. That was actually a shorter clip. Then he goes to Afghanistan. Then he goes to Iraq. And he lingers around in Iraq for a while. And then doesn't ever go back to Ukraine. And they start talking about the windmills and things like that. All that kind of stuff. The same thing happened with, actually, no, it was COVID. He switched over to windmills, where they started talking about California and the droughts and the fires. And then that turned into Teslas and the chargers and windmills and all this stuff like that. That's what he does. And the thing is, though, that's beneficial to him because it's a long form conversation. That's what Ron DeSantis or not Ron DeSantis. Oh my God, that's what Joe Rogan does. I was gonna say Ron DeSantis should have gone on that show, and he should go on in the future sometime. Just because of the fact that's where he would actually be pretty successful at, because he's able to have very detailed conversations, and you would definitely have like the COVID conversation. You were not going to have the COVID conversation in this thing, and you didn't. When they did touch on it, they mostly just drifted off. He did spend, I want to say he spent more time talking about the Lincoln bedroom and Abraham Lincoln in general than he talked about COVID whatsoever on that entire podcast. He definitely talked about more about UFC than he talked about, not even him. He had Joe talked more about UFC than he talked about COVID. Back to it, they did bring it up slightly every now and then. It popped up, like when they were talking about the election near the end. He was bringing up how, yeah, they used COVID to run this scam for this the ballot harvesting. They run that it was COVID that did it. It's like, motherfucker, you signed that bill. Like everything you're complaining about, you did. And who's the day that you're talking about? It was you. So it was that he was like throwing a bunch of misinformation out there, especially about like the election. And
I want to talk about 2020 because you said over and over that you were robbed in 2020.
Yeah, totally.
How do you think you were robbed? Everybody always cuts you off. I'm going to allow.
Well, they not only cut you off. Well, what I'd rather do is we'll do it another time, and I would bring in papers that you would not believe. So many different papers. That election was so crooked. It was the most crooked election.
Okay, but give me some examples of how.
Well, let's start from the top and the easy ones.
Okay.
They were supposed to get legislative approval to do the things they did, and they didn't get it. In many cases, they didn't get it.
What things?
Anything.
Legislative approval,
like for extensions of the voting, for voting earlier, for this, for all different things. By law, they had to get legislative approvals. You don't have to go any further than that. If you take a look at Wisconsin, they virtually admitted that the election was rigged, robbed, and stolen. They wouldn't give access in certain areas to the ballots because the ballots weren't signed. They weren't originals. We could go into this stuff. We could go into the ballots, or we could go into the overall. I'll give you another one.
Are you going to present this ever? Do you think like?
Let me just give you one more before. 51 intelligence agents.
Let me back that up again because this is my favorite part.
Well, let me
ever. Do you think like?
Let me just give you one more before. 51 intelligence agents come up that the laptop was from Russia. It turned out to be totally false.
51 former intelligence agents, right?
They say that made. I don't believe it's this much, but it doesn't matter. I lost by I didn't lose, but they say I lost, Joe. They say I lost by 22,000 votes. That's like 0.1%, less than that. It's a tiny little thing. 22,000 votes spread over that's spread over this period. So 51 intelligence agents lied. They lied. They lied. They knew it was. It was Hunter's. It was from his bed. It was Hunter's laptop. They said it was created by Russia. Russia. It was the Russia hoax.
What do you do? So I want to talk about 2020
again. The question was, what fraud are you talking about? Like specifically, can you tell me? Because they always cut you off, and it's not that they always cut him off; is that he does exactly what he's doing there, and it never goes anywhere. So they're like, wait, let's get back. And then he'll say something that's just like, all right, what you just said just now was crazy. So now I have to adjust what you just said. For example, in that case, you would start turning into, well, you're talking about the intelligence agencies. And it's, oh, but the Hunter Biden thing. Oh, well, Hunter Biden. And they stopped talking about the actual, what he was talking about, which is he was trying to talk about what happened in Wisconsin, which is that the state legislature did not do what it was supposed to do, which is to actually pass like legislation to authorize the ability for these drop boxes. They didn't create that, so they did it without authorization from the state government to do this. But the federal government had already given the ability to do it. So that's what you could say is an issue. And that's more of like a technicality that the state legislature didn't do something during your elections. So the state had to change the state law, and they didn't. They basically did it. I think he did an executive order, which he's not supposed to do anyway. And it literally says it has to be the state legislature that does it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things we weren't supposed to be doing around that time, and yet somehow they were getting done by executive order.
Yeah, it was COVID, so there was a bunch of shit. And the thing that made me laugh is that before that part, which unfortunately didn't have it in there, he's talking about how they ran this scam and the ballot harvesting and all this stuff. They set this up the way, and I'm like, who the fuck is they? That's your signature on that bill. You signed it. You wanted it to go through because they convinced you to do it, and now you don't want to acknowledge that was your CARES Act. But it's one of my favorite things. Like I said, one of my other favorite things was it's a minor thing. He said Tad Lincoln died, and I was just like, wrong kid. It was the earlier kid that died. But it was just one of those things where he decided to pontificate about for some reason, I shouldn't even say for some reason, this is Donald Trump we're talking about. He's talking about the Lincoln bedroom, and then for some reason, I keep saying for some reason, it's because it's Donald Trump. It's not for some reason. It's Donald Trump. He talked about the Lincoln bedroom, and so he started talking about Lincoln and started talking about the melancholy that Lincoln and his wife had when their son died. Wrong son, though, he said Ted. But in general, but he's talking about it, and I'm like, what were we talking about in the first place? Because I don't even remember. And that's when I was just like, I just sat there. I was just like, good job, because I don't know what the fuck we were talking about. It was like I said, the best surrealist play I've ever seen. Like if you ever watched like I can't even think of the play anymore now. It's like oh my god, I can't remember. It's an old absurdist play, or not even absurdist. It's existentialist. No Exit, where they're just basically all on stage together, and it's hell is other people. It's just these two people in this case sitting across from each other having completely separate conversations. Every now and then they meet in the middle, and then it just rambles on to other fucking topics that have nothing to do with anything that they were originally going to be talking about, because he didn't hit anything. Like I said, one of the ones that you could say that he hit more on and they never went anywhere with was the tariffs. Because he asked him, he's like, well, how are you going to do it? And then he said, did his usual speech thing. And because there was nowhere to go with it, they switched the subjects. See other clips of this thing that I really enjoyed. But like I said, it was a very entertaining performance art. It was extremely absurd. Here's where he lost. Hold up.
Right. They say that I don't believe it's this much, but it doesn't matter. I lost by I didn't lose, but they say I lost, Joe. They say I lost by 22,000 votes.
I didn't lose, and I lost by 22,000 votes. It was, like I said, it was very surreal. It's very enjoyable if you don't consider the fact that that's the guy that they want to be president.